This is a lecture on Georgia O'Keeffe, a marvelous American painter, and we're going to jump in and look at some of her works from different time periods and try to see what she has to teach us about vision and seeing the world and responding to it. We'll also look at some photographs of her place where she lived, her way of life. We can see a little bit from those photos. And we'll finish up by looking at some photos of her, some taken by her husband and others taken by some of her many, many fans who reached out to her as she continued to live in this marvelous residence, which we'll see in just a minute. We want to jump into the elements of her style first, and I want to put these up because I think this is really important to have in mind as we look at some of her works. Her works hit us with lots of direct impact, but the ideas, I think, surrounding her work add a lot and really expand the what she has done and what she's accomplished in her work. First of all, we want to think about the color and line, the vocabulary that she uses, the visual vocabulary, which is very important to see how she draws lines, what colors she uses, how does she match color and line in a very, very unique way. Her styles that she's gone through over her life all incorporate a very powerful sense of color and line. The subject matter that she's taken up almost always, I think, if we have to unite it, put it together into a coherent pattern, we would definitely say that she has a kind of symbolism of landscape, of looking at what's around her, and also a feeling or strong feeling about nature and the spirituality of nature. At times, her work seems to be almost animist in its feeling that the world is alive, the objects in the world have a kind of living presence. And this takes place even when she's painting in New York City, the city of cities, from which she retreated to, retreat is not the right word, from which she left to go and live in the desert of New Mexico. She has a great sense of space, and again, whether she's looking at very small, focused subject matter like her flowers, but also if she's looking at a mountain range or even just the sky or a single skull or bone. Something about her sense of space lets her find the interior, find a kind of comforting feeling in whatever object she turns her attention to. Many people have called her styleless, and I'm not sure that's appropriate, but I think that she's not concerned with style. She's concerned with exploring the world through her art. And that involves, at times, a very artful, right, very intentional, artistic approach. But at other times, it allows her to move away from the artfulness and try to focus on just the objects itself. She's very visionary, and I think this is something that is a large part of her appeal. She sees the world as in various stages of becoming, whether it's a flower or the skull of a dead animal. She sees this sense of process, and that goes back to her idea of, or her expression of nature and spirituality. She has a lot of sensuality and eroticism, I think it's there in the work, even though she denied that. We'll see that when we look at some of her works, that it's very erotic. But I think in the best sense, not in any X-rated pornographic sense by any means, but very much involved with the pleasing nature of whatever subject matter she turns her attention to. So we can call that erotic, I think, pretty clearly. Lastly, she's really an icon, a feminist icon, and you'll see that as the work progresses, as we look at her different styles over her through her life. She's a really strong personality, very independent, lived by herself in the desert as a single woman, kind of almost unbelievable. And because of that, I think she's a great heroine, hero, whichever gendered word you want to use, because she really did so many things as a woman that that were unusual and very unique during her lifetime. But let's jump in and look at some of the paintings, because I'm sure she wouldn't want to dwell on her life, but would rather have us focus on her paintings. The photograph here behind Abstractions, which is the first style we'll look at, were taken by me during a visit. I visited Georgia O'Keeffe's home and the gallery in Santa Fe, and took a look at where she lived and tried to get some photographs of the surrounding area. And I think that helps to focus, to see more of what she saw by looking at some of these photographs. So all the photographs in this talk, except for those taken by her husband at the very end, and other photographers, are mine. Music, Pink and Blue. Georgia O'Keeffe was a great lover of music. She loved music. One of the things that she had in her home in New Mexico, far outside the city, was a record player, and she was a great lover of music of all kinds. So here we see what might be called synesthesia, right? The painting of sounds, moving between the visual and the aural experience, right? Listening and looking combined. And we can see that here she's layering colors on colors, creating space, a very strong sense of how lines and colors work together. And this was very much part of the idea of abstract art at that period of time. Blue and Green, again, music. She has a very different feeling for the music here, and we can feel it's of its time, right? The lower left-hand movement and the very middle part. But we also see she has a very unique style that's all her own, already emerging, as the colors and the lines work together to create a very, I think, abstract representation of music and of color as well. This series is, again, staying with the abstract, but putting many more colors in and looking at the shapes and not having everything perfectly balanced exactly, but flowing and capturing the kind of energy of the natural world. And it could be a flower, it could be some natural object, and we'll move on to a couple other paintings which are much more related to especially the female body. These paintings, when they came out, both in the 1920s and in the 1930s, many people ask her, is she painting a vagina? Is she creating representation of the female sexual organs and organs of birth, but she denied that and said, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think we can see a certain representational element, even to her abstract work. But maybe is it sexual or not sexual? That's not the right question. The question is, does it work? Is it pleasing? Is it filled with colors and lines? And does it draw us in? In all of these abstract works, she has a kind of focal point and a great ability to kind of bring the viewer inside the painting itself, inside the space, inside the objects there. Georgia O'Keeffe came from the Midwest. She was born there and she traveled around the country. She was a painting teacher, but at that time, women artists could only teach at women's colleges or high schools. But Georgia O'Keeffe took the opportunity to move and to see all of America. She was deeply, I think, moved by the idea of America as a culture, as a country. Not to say she's nationalist, but just the beauty of the place. And she moved around from one art teaching job to another and did sketch after sketch after sketch and worked as a kind of, teacher, but also worked for her own art to develop it in all these different places. This photo here is in close by the biggest city that she would have gone to, and you can see the adobe work here. We'll talk about that later. But she had spent a lot of time actually in New York City, which is kind of unusual because she spent the latter part of her life in the desert of New Mexico. But when she was in New York, she was married photographer, and we'll see some of his photographs later. She was quite, I think, enamored of New York City, impressed by it. But you can still see this kind of focus on nature, right? The sun blotting out the high rise. The Shelton was one of the large skyscrapers of the time. And she, I think, wanted to blend together the shapes, natural shapes, and artificial shapes of the building together. And we see that she's kind of looking with a photographer's eye here, borrowed from her husband, who was a photographer. You can see those kind of sunspots that you would get in photographs and videos of the time. Night shot, again, has the moon, stars, even with the buildings blocking them out in black and in white. The blue of the sky, the night sky, still comes through. And she has a nice three-part, 1, 2, and up at the top, 3 circles of nature balancing out the sharp lines and rectangles of the buildings. The Radiator Building here was also one of the famous buildings in New York at the time, one of the skyscrapers. She puts in some other colors here, which really add to it, a little bit of red and orange and yellow here, as well as this white smoke wafting up to the greenish color in the sky. These lights were often used as advertising or opening night of a film or a Broadway play. And she and her husband, Joseph Stiglitz is his name, they lived in one of the skyscrapers. The skyscraper the Shelton, which was originally made as office building, but people didn't like to go up in it at first, right? They're not used to skyscrapers. And so the rent was reduced, and she and Joseph Stiglitz moved into a skyscraper, almost exactly the opposite to her later life. And they lived there and they saw the world from this high point of view, good and bad. And here, I think, is a little bit of a cynical color scheme, red, white, and blue, the colors of the American flag. And with all the factories there and looking out at the East River, the feeling of, the artificial production of who knows what in those factories is kind of taking over the landscape, and a very powerful sun up here coming through the fog and the smoke and the clouds of the area. Georgia O'Keeffe is probably most famous for her flowers, and that's what we're going to look at next. She said that she wanted to paint flowers that would make even New Yorkers see what I see in flowers. Again, this is her house. This is a photograph of the adobe house where she lived, and there'll be a few more of those photos. But let's jump into the flowers, because that's really where she became famous and part of what she's really famous for. She painted an immense number of flower paintings, over 200, right? In a very short period of time, right? So that's, a lot of paintings of flowers, and these are not studies or practice paintings. These are finished, accomplished paintings. She magnified the flowers, and we'll see that in just a second. She liked to look close in detail, and gives a great deal of expressiveness to the flowers. They really feel alive. They have a kind of textural feeling to them. They feel waxy, or they feel soft, or they feel fluffy, right? So she manages to really combine this abstract approach, which was so popular in art at that time, but she puts it together with a kind of objective, very realistic eye. The colors that she uses is very powerful, and this quote from her, "Color is the one thing that makes life worth living." What a beautiful quote, right? That she really enjoys and revels in color, and we might even say that color is the subject matter of these paintings. But what she really wanted to do, I think, was to kind of break the hold of realism and to try to offer us a new way of looking at objects and thinking about the shapes and colors and processes of nature. She wants us to see the world differently. Light iris, those of you who are not native speakers of English, you can look up the word for each of these flowers, which is very important, right? She uses and knows the words and uses those words as the title. And she calls this light iris, looking at the light. How does the light fall on this flower? And here is, again, the abstraction together with realism. We get the kind of realistic, crinkly line here that you do see in nature on some flowers, and the bundling up of softer shapes in the middle. And again, these paintings were often analyzed as being erotic expressions. related to the female body, but Georgia O'Keeffe didn't really agree with that. I think she's just painting nature, and nature's forms repeat themselves, right? Nature's forms are used over and over again in many, many different contexts. So that's probably a little bit better way of looking at this. The oriental poppies here are just magnificent. The sharp, powerful orange and yellow contrasting with the black and hints of black along the edge here. She really wanted us to see that. Wow, this is bold and powerful, filled with energy, right? It's as if the painting brings out the energy, the inside energy of that flower. In the later part of her life, she kind of left her husband in New York and bought a home in New Mexico. And that home became the place where she lived and worked for really the last part of her life, the last half of her life. She became interested in the desert and in the skulls. This is some of the skulls that she collected with the horns here and the ram's head over here. She would go out and collect these in the desert. She had a car, and she would sleep underneath it in the heat of the afternoon, paint in the morning, and then take a rest in the afternoon, and then paint again in the evening light. And she wanted, I think, to see how the desert was a place of great value and great meaning and great beauty. Usually we think of the desert as there's nothing there, but that was not Georgia O'Keeffe's view. She really felt the desert was a place with lots of things to look at. She had a sense, as I mentioned before, of a kind of creating a new American style that is rooted in place. And for whatever personal reasons, she really, I think, found her place there in the New Mexican desert. And she would go out to collect trophies, as she called them, the bones, and position them and examine them and live with them. She has them outside her house, as we just saw, but inside as well. And to put those bones into a composition. So just like people said the flowers were about reproduction, the creation of life, the inner place of birth, of sexuality and eroticism, which she denied. The bones were often thought of as death, but she didn't see it that way either. She felt the bones were equally alive as anything else, just in a different time frame. She focuses a lot on light in these paintings. So if the flowers are about color, we might say her desert and skull paintings are really about light. And again, she brings in increasingly a spiritual side to her painting to make us see what we don't usually see, to make us see what is unseen, and to make people stop and look and think about the form of nature and the harmony of all things in nature. She really does that with these bone and skull paintings. Here's the horse's skull with a blue background. She would sometimes paint inside and sometimes outside, but for these compositions, she would often put it in the shade of the house. But the important point is that she really sees this skull. If you start to look at it, you feel it's almost alive. The horse is kind of looking at us, and not gone at all. We can get, of course, a ghostly feeling, right? She called her ranch the Ghost Ranch. But I think that is not really about the dead, but about the living, or the power of these trophies, as she called them, which were left in the desert and she picked up, bleached by the sun. Here, she gives us a great red, white, and blue American colors painting. The black in the middle really contrasts with the white, but we can hear and see and feel and almost touch this bone which is presented to us. And she has a great sense of how to bring those close to us, or closer than they would be otherwise. Here she combines the flower and the skulls with roses, calico roses, put together into a composition, a still life. Again, this still life is taken from European art, but it's also given an American updating here, or she would have thought of it that way, to make an American still life. And she does that with very subtle colors here, right? There's not much. There's black, and there's all shades of white and beige here, a brownish hint of yellow and sienna color. But she is able to really make the skull come alive with the roses, as if, she'd given up on people to understand her feeling about the skull. She popped in some flowers. But I think she also just really had a sense of how those objects work together, and what putting those objects together, how that impacts us in ways that we often can't describe. Here she's again going back to some very abstract style of composition. The head is floating above the mountains in the distance, and a flower is floating there as well, with these clouds, stormy clouds, it feels like to me. And look at how she puts all of that together, right? Sky, mountains, the soft flow of those mountains, the colors, a contrast. And then in the foreground, or hanging in the sky, are these two objects, so we can see them in some way, right? It's taken out of its normal context and represented to us so that we see it. Composition again here with the poinsettia flowers and the mule's skull up close, a different balance here, but we get a sense with the flow of these clouds up to the sky, how much energy is there, and the energy from these poinsettias and the skull looking out at us, right? We can see the inside of it, as always, and the background of these soft, gentle flow of hills in the back. No shortage of energy here, and the fiery red and the bones in the foreground. And again, a different way of looking at the focused, detailed bones together with the larger expanse of the desert hills leading off into the horizon. even more abstract here, taking the pelvis bones and putting them together. We have the sun, or maybe the moon here. It's so bright, we think of it almost as if the sun, but I think she puts in the blue near circle together with this moon, and looks at how the moon lights up the desert, turning it blue. And again, she wants us to see the color, see the line, see the composition more deeply. If the bone was set into the earth, or if the background was closer, it wouldn't be the same painting by any means. She's playing with these to get us to see the different parts again, to see it better, to see it more deeply. The next section is photographs that I took of O'Keeffe's home in New Mexico. And this is a place that she settled and felt really quite home. And you can see the road hasn't changed much in the past 100 years. There's some highway here, but we see, these beautiful shapes and colors and layers of the mountains as it's worn down. And again, she wouldn't see this as being empty space, but filled space. Here's her home. It was made of adobe. She had people help her to build it. She designed it, and she would add on space. They didn't allow photographs on the inside, but from the outside we can see that, she took a lot of time and effort and brought in the plants and stones and set up her home exactly how she wanted it. Adobe is traditional material to use to build homes in this area. It's mud, brick, mud mixed together. You can see some of the straw here, and piling up for the chimney for the space. It's very cool in the hot of the summer. It gets very, very hot in this area. And it's also quite warm in the winter. And we can see a little bit of the construction, all the different areas that she has. The roof was often used as a garden, used for distinct purposes, and so there's ladders all over the place. All of it has like a different point of view to look at the plants, to look at the garden. She was a tremendous gardener, so in addition to listening to music, she loved to garden. And we can see here a garden that's still kept up by the society, O'Keeffe Society, that owns the land and takes care of it. And it's still good for growing vegetables. She grew everything herself. Maybe not everything, but a lot of her produce that she ate and she used to cook, she grew herself. She would go out from her home. She had a car. She would drive out into the desert and paint as much as she could. We can see the influence of the colors and shapes here on what she did. She had a great eye, I think, for all of these formations, which are so unique and something that you almost never see other places. I want to finish up this lecture by looking at some photographs of Georgia O'Keeffe, because I think she's a very powerful, very attractive person, filled with energy, filled with a kind of vision, and we can see that here. This is a photograph taken by her husband at the time, who she eventually kind of separated from, and they stayed married until his death. But he took a series of photographs of her, some of them with her paintings behind her, and some in various different stages. This looks like a film at the time, right? The actress pulling her collar tight around her, and we can see her beauty and the depths of her character, hands. So important for artists, the control, her fingers, the ability to use her fingers to produce these paintings. He also took a large number of nude photos of her. You can search those for yourself online. I didn't put those in case the Japanese Education Ministry is looking in on this, which I guess they do from time to time. But you can certainly find those nude photos of her. And she, interestingly, turns herself into the subject matter of his photographs. I like this one a lot. It shows her fingers, right? The really creative control of the brush and the lines and all the things that she did with her fingers. Here, just feeling this skull so that we can feel it at the same time. Here she is in her car that she used to drive out into the desert. This is a classic photograph of her, the beautiful lines of the car and her tied on headdress so she didn't get burned from the sun. We can see her determination, her strength of character, I think, in that. This photograph is one from the very end of her life, and a nice little backbone here connecting not just her hands, but no doubt at this point she's in her 90s at this point, and lived really a long life, but a productive life too. She never really stopped painting, but just kept working. And this is the last photograph, and I think a great one to end with, because we can see the background here. We can see the skulls, which are so important to her. Some of the flora over here. And she herself, in some ways, has become the subject matter of her own life. So this was taken right before she passed away in her 90s, late 90s. So she's a powerful figure, and I hope this gives you some idea of her life and her work, gives you some ideas to kind of work with and to think about, and to see how she's trying to get us to see the world differently through her eyes. And by looking at her paintings again and again, we start to see her vision, which is something that all great artists manage to do, if they're successful, is to help us see the world better, help us understand it, help us to feel the world. And I think she's somebody who felt the world deeply, saw it very closely, and wanted to share that with all of us. Thanks for listening. And please go and check out more on Georgia O'Keeffe. She's such a popular artist, and you can find lots more information about her online and in books in many, many different places. Thanks for listening.